Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm doing the TBR book tag. So TBR stands for to be read, which many booktube veterans will already know here on this channel, and today I'm doing a tag that has various questions about your TBR, how you organise it, etc, etc. I will leave a link down below for the original tag as well as all the questions if you want to do it yourself, and I never really tag anybody in these kinds of things, so if you want to do this one, consider yourself tagged. So the first question is, how do you keep track of your TBR pile? So I use Goodreads very extensively to track all of my books, and as soon as they set up how to import from Goodreads, I will be checking out Booksloth, which is a new app that a lot of people are talking about at the moment. Very interesting, very exciting. And I have kind of two different shelves that I use to track my TBR. I have my TBR owned shelf, which is literally all the books that I own that I have not read yet in whatever form, and then I have my general want to read list, which is a collection of books that I am interested in but I don't currently have access to in some way, shape or form. Within that, I also decided to start putting in like a classics TBR, a non-fiction TBR and a non-fiction want to read, so that it was slightly easier to see what the spread of kind of those major genre groups were for me, so that it was easier to see kind of am I reading enough non-fiction to then balance out my interest in non-fiction that I have kind of coming up, if that made any sense at all. Question number 2 is your TBR mostly print or ebooks? So it is predominantly print. I have at any given moment for anywhere from 40 to 60 ebooks on my Kindle that I've not read yet, and then anywhere from 20 to 30 audiobooks on my Audible account that I've not read yet, and then the rest of them are physical books, which I think there's around 100 physical books at the moment on my shelves. So my TBR sits anywhere from like 160 to 180 books at any given kind of time. It's slowly creeping up, but I might try and look at slowly getting it to creep down next year. Part of the reasons why it's crept up this year is there's been a couple of genres that I've suddenly got far more interested in that I wasn't really reading before this year, nature writing and contemporary romance being two of the really big ones, so that's naturally meant that my TBR pile has definitely crept up. I don't really mind having a big TBR pile. I find because I read from so many different genres, I like to have on my shelf at any given time like at least 3 or 4 books within a genre that I enjoy reading, so that way when I am in the mood to read that particular genre, I've got a choice within it. But then that's where when you have suddenly developing interest in more and more niche subgenres, or indeed in entire genres that you've not really read much of before, like contemporary romance, that number can quite swiftly climb, and it can also climb if I'm not careful, and that number becomes, rather than 3 or 4, it becomes 5 or 6, and then that's where the whole thing can multiply quite quickly without me fully realising that it's happening. Question 3 is, how do you determine which book from your TBR to read next? Now normally I do have a monthly TBR on the go. For September I'm going far more mood reading, which I talked about in my last TBR video, but generally when I'm curating a TBR, I like to view my reading as kind of sort of like a balanced diet. I like there to be something in there that I think I'm going to have some kind of mood for, so I like to have a nice spread of genres and also a nice spread of like fiction and non-fiction, and I try and balance it with a combination of what I consider to be more light-hearted reads, and then also more kind of fibrous, dense, good for you style reads, in the same way that you would kind of consider how you approach like your nutrition and that kind of thing. Obviously that is really dependent on like what is going on in my life. If things are a little bit more settled, then I feel like I have the head space to dedicate to bigger, chunkier, more dense tomes that are going to require a bit more energy from me as a reader. At the moment there's a lot of things up in the air, which I talked about in my last TBR video, which means that I'm feeling a little bit more frazzled, a little bit more overwhelmed, and just that space isn't really quite there to dedicate to kind of a more dense, whether it be like a classic or a non-fiction or something like that. So there's definitely going to be, or indeed like some of the more complicated fantasy world building that requires you to hold lots of information about a world in your head. So for this month it's definitely going to be relaxing a bit more with some lighter, easier to read books and comfort read books for like how I define a comfort read. So yeah, so that's kind of how I approach most of my TBRs. The next question is a book that has been on your TBR list the longest. I didn't actually go and check, but one that I know has been on my shelf for a very long time is Quiet by Susan Cain. That is such a difficult cover to read. This is a non-fiction that is about the power of introverts in a world that can't stop talking, and it's kind of looking at that introvert-extrovert dichotomy, sort of looking at some of the science behind it, but also the reasons why introverts tend to get ignored, and like the power that they can bring to various groups, and whether it be in a social or a work setting. This is one that was on my TBR super early on, like a couple of years ago when I first started getting back into reading, has been put into like unhaul piles and then pulled back out of them several times, and I really do need to either like you know, to quote my grandma, piss or get off the pot. Like, I either need to get rid of it or I need to read it. It's slightly smaller font than I would normally go for, which is one of the reasons why I think it's kind of moseying on and moseying off. And I'm somebody who considers myself a fairly big extrovert, so that's probably a good reason to actually read this. But for some reason, that's also one of the reasons why I've thought like maybe it's not something that I would be that interested in. So I think it might be time to finally pick this one up and sort of basically decide what I'm going to be doing with it. But I've heard really positive things about it, which is why it keeps coming back onto my TBR. The next question is a book that you've recently added to your TBR. So I went shopping yesterday with my darling mother, and we went to one of my favourite independent bookstores called Topping & Co. If you're based in the UK, do check out their online shop. They have a shop in Ely, in Edinburgh, and I think one down in like somewhere along the coast, and I can't remember exactly where. But I bought 5 books, one for Andy, and within that, probably the one that I'm most excited about is Kindred, Neanderthal Life, Love, Death and Art by Wragg Sykes. This, as again the subtitle suggests, it is about the Neanderthals, which is something that I've been more interested in due to some of the prehistoric reading that I've been doing recently. Neanderthals definitely get a bad rep for being kind of grunty cavemen, ooh, fire kind of a vibe, whereas actually they were a far more sophisticated and intelligent race of humans that than we give credit for, and that the kind of general sort of common knowledge view of them is. And I listened to a podcast semi-recently called You're Dead to Me that had an episode on the Neanderthals, so it was very, very interesting. So when this popped up on my Twitter as being shared by one of the paleontologists I follow, I was like, I definitely need to grab a copy, and I'm really, really interested in it. And I'm also excited because I am trying to read more women authors and basically just non-white men authors in my nature writing and in my like natural history section, because it definitely is very dominated by men right now. So this looks very cool. The next question is a book on your TBR strictly because of its beautiful cover. Now, none of the books on my shelf are strictly because of their beautiful covers. I do have some vague interest in the story as well. The exception maybe being some of the classics collections that I'm slowly sort of collecting all of them, all the editions of, but we're going to ignore those. But one that I did buy, very much influenced by its cover rather than its story, is Wragg by Noel O'Reilly. I am reading this at the moment, so it's technically on my currently reading list rather than my TBR, but this is one that the story is one, I think it might be YA. It reads like a YA at the moment, and it's been described as very similar to the Essex Serpent, which I didn't actually enjoy that much, which means it's a bit strange that I then picked up another book that is classed as similar to it. But the cover is stunning, so I kind of wanted to give it a chance. I figured it'd be interesting to check out another sort of coastal gothic thriller kind of vibe. So far it's enjoyable enough that I'm going to continue it, but I don't think it's going to make its way onto any favourites list, let's put it that way. But the cover is gorgeous. I love the colour, I love all the artwork, I love underwater, undersea kind of things. This is great. The next question is a book on your TBR that you never plan on reading, and I do not have any of these. If it is on my TBR, I do plan on reading it in some way, shape or form, and if I then reach the stage where I'm no longer planning on reading it, I am pretty good at unhauling books probably once every 6 months or so, where I go through and really critically look at like, am I actually going to read this? And if my tastes have changed, or if I found that it was filling a hole in my TBR where I found other books that I think I'm going to enjoy more, then it does make its way off. So I'm fairly good at going through that. We're just about to move house, which is one of the reasons why I'm a little frazzled, and once we do that I will have another scan through, but I recently did it literally only in June, so everything on my shelf right now I am excited for. I even do it on things where like the space is less of a problem, like on my e-reader. I'm still pretty good at deleting off books that I don't think I'm genuinely going to read, so I don't have any of those. The next question is an unpublished book on your TBR that you're excited for. And again, I don't have any of these either. I don't request ARCs. I turn down most offers from publishers for unpublished books. I've only actually accepted one on my channel, I think, across the entire channel, which was an excellent book. It's called Humankind, very good. But generally, I'm not interested in getting a hold of books before they are published. If there are any books on my general want to read list that are like new releases that haven't come out yet, I'm very bad at keeping track of that as well, so I can't think of any that immediately spring to mind, because I'm never that invested about reading like the latest book or the newest book. I just like reading the books that I like to read, and in some cases they're brand new because of sort of being now in the book community and being more aware of books that are coming out, but also in some cases they're just they're super old books, and that's completely fine. The next question is a book on your TBR that basically everyone's read but you. And for that one, I'm going to go for The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This is the second book from Erin Morgenstern, who is the author of The Night Circus, which is an absolute booktube darling. Great book, I really enjoyed it as well. This is her next one that's come out. It's nothing to do with The Night Circus, but it was so hotly anticipated, and when it first came out, which I think was like November time last year, everyone was releasing reviews of it, everyone was releasing, it was on their TBRs, it was on their wrap-ups, like everyone had either read it already because they had an arc and then were finally releasing their content on it, or was desperately trying to get through it to release current content on it. I actually bothered to pre-order it, as well as 2 other books that I also still haven't read, proving that pre-orders for me are a complete waste of time. That's not how I interact with books. It's stunning, but the response has been really lukewarm from the book community, so I don't really know when I'm going to get around to it. It's on my 5-star predictions list for this year, but I'm also not excited about it particularly, so I think that 5-star prediction might have swiftly kind of dropped from the number of mixed / negative reviews I've heard, and it might end up actually getting unhauled soon. I don't really know. The thing is, it's very pretty, but I've just heard that the story goes nowhere. So if I don't get to it by the end of the year, I don't know if I actually will, and I'm a little bit torn, but it feels like everybody and their mother has read this book. The next one is a book on your TBR that everyone recommends to you, and I really struggled to pick one out in particular, just because I have so many, again, different varied genres, and there's a lot of books that like a couple of people have recommended, but I don't think I have anything particularly sitting on my shelf right now that is like, oh my god, you must read that, why haven't you read that yet? Or at least I don't think so. I'm mainly focused on my physical TBR, so maybe there's something sitting on my Kindle. But one that was very popular through Springathon, which was the nature writing readathon I co-hosted back in May, was Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge and the Teaching of Plants by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I picked this up again yesterday with my mum because, again, it was one that I'd heard the name so many times. It was either on people's TBRs or was on people's recommendations list. I've only heard good things about it, so I think it's one that, and again, kind of talking to a few people who were involved in Springathon, they've all said, like, it's excellent, you should totally read it. So I think this is probably the most recommended on my physical shelf at the moment. There might be some other, like, slightly hyped up books on my Kindle, but I really can't think of anything right now, so we're going to go for this one. Also, it's just one that I'm really excited for, so I wanted to show you. Then the next question is a book on your TBR that you're dying to read. And because I'm in such a weird mood reading kind of mood at the moment, it was quite hard to pick one. But at the moment, I think I'm going to go for The Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas. I'm really excited to jump back into this book. I started it when I was a teenager, and I can't remember if I finished it or not, which means I probably didn't. I went as one of the Three Musketeers for a World Book Day, which is why we were reading it, but I don't think we finished it before the World Book Day, and then we just never continued it. I really like Alexander Dumas. I loved The Count of Monte Cristo. I think this can be good fun, and I have very fond memories of the bits of the Three Musketeers that I can remember it being quite funny, so I'm excited to jump back into this one. But again, I don't really know exactly when I'm going to do that because there are so many other ones that I'm kind of interested in, and I just don't know what mood I'm in at the moment for any of my reading, which is causing mild problems trying to pick things. But we're going to go with that one. Let's say that one. It is on my classics TBR for this year as well. And then the final question is, how many books are on your TBR shelf? And we are going to find out the exact number at this current moment in time on my Goodreads. So according to my Goodreads shelf that I did update yesterday with the new ones that have just come in, I have 183 unread books on my shelf. Now, this does not include the 7 books that I've classed as DNF return to, which means I started them and I either wasn't in the right mood, or they're like a big bind up of a bunch of books where I've read some of the books but not all of them, or various things like that. So there are 7 books in there that are ones that I will return to at some point. So if we add those in, there are 190 not finished books on my bookshelf. So in some cases, quite a high number. Some of you will be like, I've got 300, don't worry, love. Or some of you will be like, oh my god, that sounds very stressful. To me, I kind of like it. I did a thing last year where I tried to get it down, and I was like giving myself book credits where I was only allowed to buy a book when I'd read 2, because I wanted to like start to reduce that number. And then I realised that actually I really don't mind having such a large TBR because of the variety of genres on it. If you were to actually say, like, Emma, how many nature writing books do you have in your TBR, they're all quite manageable numbers. The only one that's got mildly out of control is the history section, and that we did a good job of making a dent with for the history challenge. So generally I feel kind of okay with where all the books are right now, and that I do get through them at a fairly decent rate. The turnover is very high, even if the overall number is also quite high. So yeah, so that is the TBR book tag. It was fun to kind of just chill and do a tag and chat about how I like to organise my books. Once I do move, I might do a live stream of reorganising my books when we get there and kind of putting them all onto the shelves and things like that. So do let me know in the comments down below if you'd be interested in that. I don't know what it will be because we still don't have anywhere lined up. It's okay, we're getting there. But yeah, so that is it from me. Feel free to do this tag if you want to. Have a wonderful reading week, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye!